Hey guys, I hope you're doing well. I will be there in a little bit, the second half of class, but for right now I want to show you how to begin working. Today we're going to be reviewing everything we've learned so far about quadratics, and it will help you, this video will help you to be able to do your assignment, and then you'll have another review assignment, and then I will be back. So the first thing that I need you guys to do is to grab your graphing calculators. Remember, if you don't know what number you are, it's listed on the little piece of paper by the calculators. So quickly grab your graphing calculators. If you don't remember which number you are, or I'm sorry, if your calculator does not have batteries, that's what I'm trying to say, then you can share with a neighbor, but I think almost everyone's is ready. Alright, you'll remember from last week we had lots of things that we had to do. So if we look at these directions, it says graph the following quadratic equation and fill in every part of the question. Use your graphing calculator to help, and then when you graph, don't forget to label the vertex and the axis of symmetry on the graph. So last week we did a lot of things with graphing. We factored, we found the vertex, we found the min and the max, etc. So today we're going to bring it all together. So it says we are supposed to be graphing. So remember, if we are graphing, the first thing we need to do is find the vertex. And if we look here, there's a box that has been labeled vertex. Alright? So there's a box there labeled vertex, and we're going to be using that box to help us. Let me change something here. Alright, so when we find a vertex and it's written in standard form, remember we need to do opposite of b over 2a. So if I look at this, the opposite of b, well first of all let's go down here and let's label our a, b, and c. If we're going to label a, b, and c, our a is 1, b is 3, and c is a negative 28. Alright, so let's put that in. So if we're going to find our vertex, remember we do, and I've given you space at the bottom. Oops. So you can go at the bottom and you can begin to work. The opposite of b is going to be negative 3 over 2 times my a, which is 1. So negative 3 over 2, well that doesn't reduce. Negative 3 over 2, that's the first coordinate of my vertex, right? But because we're going to be graphing this, let's use negative 1.5. Alright, so here in the box, we're going to put negative 1.5. That's the x value of our vertex. Alright? Okay, and that just went away. Alright, do you guys remember what we do now that we have negative 1.5? Yes, we need to plug it back in for x. So I'm going to get my entire equation, and I'm going to plug in, if I have x squared plus 3x minus 28 equals 0. Again, I'm going to plug in a negative 1.5 in for x. Alright, so take a few minutes. You can use your graphing calculator if you need to, and plug that in to figure out what our y value is going to be. Remember to use your parentheses if you need to when squaring something. And I'm getting negative 30.25. So that seems crazy, but I'm just going to write negative 30.25. Okay, so if we know that the vertex is negative 1.5 and negative 30.25, that's going to be kind of hard to graph, right? So before we begin graphing, let's first of all determine what our axis of symmetry is here. X equals negative 1.5, right? Because it comes from the first coordinate of our vertex. Is this going to have a min or maximum? Well, we remember if A is 1, or if A is positive, then it opens up. And if it opens up, then it has a minimum. Okay, so we're going to write that has a minimum. All right, and then it says, what's the y-intercept and what's the x-intercept? Well, the x-intercept is going to be where it crosses the x-axis, right? So in order to find the x-intercept, remember we talked about x-intercepts, roots, solutions, and zeros, all of those mean the same thing. In order to find where it crosses the x-axis, we need to basically solve this equation up here for x. So how do we solve this equation? How do you solve that for x? Well, you have to factor it first, right? So let's go ahead and see if we can x factor this. So I want to figure out what two numbers multiply to get negative 28 and add to get a 3. And you would choose 7 and 4, but the 4 is the one that needs to be negative, right? So if we were to factor this, this would be x plus 7 and x minus 4 equals 0. Because we can take the shortcut since a is 1. And what do I do with each of those things? Remember, I break it apart and I set them equal to 0. So we get x to be negative 7 and x to be 4. So those are my x-intercepts. That means the graph crosses at positive 4 and negative 7 on my x-axis. So when we go over here to the x-intercept, remember they are points. So when I write x-intercept, I'm going to put the point 4, 0, because that's the point where it crosses, and negative 7, 0. Alright, so I'm going to erase this now. Alright, the other thing we need to figure out is where does it cross the y-axis? Well, if it crosses the x-axis when y is 0, that means it's going to cross the y-axis when x is 0. It's the opposite. So I know the first coordinate of my y-intercept is 0. So then I need to figure out what's the second coordinate. Well, if x is 0, that means I can plug in 0 up here and 0 up here for x, right? Because if it's on the y-axis, then your x is 0. So if I were to plug 0 in for each of those, I'd get 0 squared plus 3 times 0 minus 28. That means this is gone and this is gone, so at negative 28. Which seems crazy, right? But we're in algebra 2, and so we're not going to get nice even answers. So I have the point 0, negative 28. That would be my y-axis. My y-intercept, I'm sorry. And now you're thinking, how the heck am I supposed to graph this? Well, the first thing that we need to do is to put it into our calculator. So grab your calculator, and on your calculator, I want you to go to your y equals button. Remember, it's the gray button there at the top. Top left, y equals. Okay, and arrow over until it's blinking in the blank. Go ahead and put this equation right here, the big equation at the top, put that in to your calculator, just as it is. Except you don't need the equals 0. The only part that you need is just x squared plus 3x minus 28. That's the only thing that you should be putting into your calculator. Remember, x is right beside the green button, and then your squared is down the left side. Making sure you have enough time to put it in. Alright, if you hit graph, you'll notice that the graph goes off the grid, off the screen. Right, you can't really see where the vertex is. But if we look at our graph, guys, do you see at 4 and -7 on my x-axis that the graph is touching the x-axis? Remember, that's because that's where my x-intercepts are. That's what we found here, was that was where your x-intercepts were. So it should cross our graph at 4 and -7. All right, but how do we make sure it's going to exactly do that? Well, I want you guys to hit second, which is the blue button, and then hit graph again, which means you really are selecting the table function because table should be in blue. So hit second and then hit graph. So then a big table should pop up. And you should see a column of X's and a column of Y's. If your neighbors did not do this and they need help, please take just a second to help your neighbor. All right, and if we notice, if we scroll up and down, so you're going to use your up and down arrows that are gray. If you look for the vertex on there, -1.5, it shouldn't be on there. It should be just whole numbers. All right? So what this means is we are going to plot some points. So on your x-axis, on the x column, scroll up to where it's -1 and -2. And you should see that the y value at -1 and -2 is both -30. And then do you see, as you go up, it's -28, and as you go down, it's also -28, and then -24, and then -24. So it's really splitting right there between -2 and -1, which makes sense because our vertex is -1.5. So what we're going to do is we're going to plot points on either side. So let's choose -3. So what I want you to do is we're going to fill in our chart. All right, so go back to your chart on your paper, and we're going to put -3 and +3. All right, so go back to then your calculator. What is the value of y when x is -3? Well, it should be -28. What is the value of y when x is +3? Well, if you go down, you should see it says -10. And then I could just randomly pick 5, 7, 9, 10, whatever, but I know from my x and y intercepts, because I found that first, I know that one of my x-intercepts is 4, so I want to make sure to have that on my grid. So when I go back to my graph, I'm going to put the next one I want is 4, which means let's do -4 as well. All right, so go back to your calculator. What is y when x is 4? It should be 0 here, because that's our point. And then the same thing is true, well, it's not the same thing, sorry. -4 means we have -24. And then we can also see that we need -7 on our graph, because that's the other x-axis. All right, so I'm going to go and hit -7, which means I should do +7 down here. All right, so -7 should be 0 if you look on your grid correctly, and +7, if we scroll down on our calculator, should be 42. Now the other thing I want you to do is I want you to label this is an x-intercept in here, and this is an x-intercept in here. All right, so we got a lot of things going on here. So the first thing that I want you to do is I just want you to draw your y-axis. So draw your y-axis with your highlighter. Or for right now, since you didn't get your highlighters, you can just draw it with your pencil. And if we're looking at all of our y values in our chart, guys, we can see that every value is less than 0 except for this last one here. every value is less than 0. So what I would like us to do is we're going to draw our y-axis up here. All right. Now clearly we don't have 30 tick marks on our y-axis, right? So what we're probably going to do is, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9. If we go by 3s or so, okay, you can choose whatever amount that you want to. So let's go by 3s. So if I'm at 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21, 24, 27, 30, 33, and 36. All right, so I'm going by 3s. And then we're going to let our x-axis just still go by 1s. And you're allowed to do that as long as you stay consistent. Like, as long as all your x's are going by the same number, that's fine. And then you can change your y's to be going by the same thing as well. All right, so the first thing that we want to graph is negative 7, 0. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That point is here. Let me try to make mine a little bit bigger. Okay. I just realized this is not the x-intercept. My x-intercept is up here. Sorry about that. All right. Another point that we have, negative 4, negative 24. So negative 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then negative 24. It's going to be right here. Negative 3, negative 28. Okay, so that's not exact, so I'll just make it an estimate there. And then my vertex is at negative 1.5, negative 30.25. And again, we are approximating because our graph is not big enough. And what should happen is it should mirror on the other side, right? So then I'm at 3, positive 3, negative 10, which is about right here. 4, 0, I want to make sure I get that one right. And then I don't have room to graph 7, 42. Okay, now again, everyone's graph is probably going to look just a little bit different, which is then why we label. So then go back and put your vertex is at the point negative 1.5, negative 30.25. Then we're going to label our, this is new, we haven't labeled our intercepts yet, but 4, 0 and negative 7, 0. And the last thing that I need, you're remembering, is that you need your axis of symmetry. And then we label our axis of symmetry. X equals negative 1.5. Whew. Not all of your graphs will be this complicated, if you will. Remember, the last thing we need to do now is fill in the solutions blank down here. And we talked about the fact that a solution, remember, is the same thing as an x-intercept. So our solutions, we're going to write, there Audrey, I made that one really crooked, so you don't feel bad. 4, comma, negative 7. Now, technically I probably should have written them in the other order since negative 7 is smaller, but it's okay. So we're just going to leave it as 4, negative 7. Those are my solutions, and the reason we're not putting the zeros in there is because the solutions is not asking for points. The solutions is asking for what are the answers to this problem, which means if you plug 4 and negative 7 into your equation, you should be able to get it right. And all my answers just disappeared, so I hope you all had that. we said it was 4, -7. Okay? All right. Let's go on to example number 2. And if you need to pause this at this time to be able to catch up, that's fine. Oops. All right. Anybody remember where we started the last time? Because at this point, there's a lot of things going on, right? So what was the first thing we did? Does anyone remember? The first thing that we did was we found the vertex. So if you need to like number the order of things that we're doing, find the vertex. And this is not in standard form. And I think, I'm sorry, it is in standard form. It's not all the way reduced, right? We could technically pull 2 out of all of that, but we're not going to do that right now. Okay, so the first thing that I want you to do is to find the vertex. So opposite of b over 2a. -10 over 4. And again, we're going to get a decimal point, and it's okay to use decimals. So if we go back to our calculator, -10 divided by 4, 2.5, -2.5. So that's the first coordinate of my vertex is -2.5. I think most of the ones in your homework assignment are even, so that will be nice. And we're going to take -2.5 and we're going to plug it in to our equation to solve for our vertex. So we have 2 times -2.5 squared plus 10 times -2.5 plus 4. Alright, so go ahead and put that into your calculator. Be very careful as you're putting it in. You don't have to do it all at the same time. You can figure one thing out and then the other. For the sake of time, I'll just tell you should get -33.5. Yuck, right? Alright, we also know that then the axis of symmetry is x equals -2.5. And we know A, B, and C is 2, 10, and 4. I can't tell you how many students miss this because they don't fill in A, B, and C. Those are free points, so please don't forget to do that. Again, the y-intercept is actually pretty easy because if we plug in 0 to our equation for x, this is gone and this is gone, which just leaves me with 4. So this means this crosses the y-axis at 0, 4. So that should be pretty easy for us. Alright, also we can figure out if it has a max or min. Remember our A is positive. So if it's positive, it's going to open up. Why does it do that? I just lost everything. Okay, if it's positive, that means it opens up. And so this has a minimum. Oh my gosh. Okay, so we said this was step number 1, -2.5, -33.5. All right. Next thing to do then is to find the x-intercepts. So this is step number 2 right here. It's to find the x-intercepts. And we do that by factoring, right? But if we look at this problem, what two numbers multiply to get 8, because remember we have to do 2 times 4, and add to get 10? The answer is nothing right now. So that means we have to use what? Yes, the quadratic formula. All right, so we need to use the quadratic formula. I know I hear your groans, even though I'm not in the room, I hear you groaning. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to find our A, B, and C, which we've already done. So at the bottom, down there where you have area to do the quadratic formula, why don't you go ahead and do that? And I'm going to, well, it doesn't matter. Okay, pull up a new screen. So we had 2x squared plus 10x plus 4 equals 0. Okay, remember our quadratic formula is x equals the opposite of b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. I will not give you complex or imaginary solutions in this lesson because I think that's just doing too much for right now, right? So the opposite of b means negative 10 plus or minus the square root. B squared would be 10 squared. 4 times 2 times 4 all over 2 times 2. And again, if you want to right now, since we're just going through notes, if you just want to watch instead of trying to copy all of this down, because I know you guys know how to do the quadratic formula. So if you want to just watch and then I'll tell you when to start writing again. Negative 10 plus or minus 10 squared is 100. I only have one negative sign, so I'm just going to write 1. 4 times 2 is 8, and 8 times 4 is 32 all over 4. So negative 10 plus or minus 100 minus 32, 68 all over 4. And we can recognize that this is 68 is not a perfect square. So if you go back to your notes now, go ahead and start writing at this point right here. Okay, everyone write down negative 10 plus or minus the square root of 68 over 4. Go ahead and write that down. Remember, we're trying to figure out where this is crossing the x and y axis, and this is getting a little complicated. So what I need to do is I need to figure out what number is this actually, because I can't graph the square root of something on my graph. So on your calculator, if you do the square root of 68, the square root button, you have to hit the blue second button first. And then you're going to hit the x squared button because you should see a little square root in blue above the x squared button. So hit second and then the x squared button. 68, and our answer is 8.246. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to be we're going to round to 8.25. So then I'm going to figure out what is negative 10 plus or minus 8.25 divided by 4. Remember we talked about we have a quadratic, we have squared, so this means I should be getting two answers. So what this really means is negative 10 plus 8.25 divided by 4, and negative 10 minus 8.25 divided by 4. Now, please notice that you need to do the entire numerator first and then divide by 4. Alright, so if I have negative 10 plus 8.25, enter, divide by 4, I get negative 0.4375. And again, that's not a nice number, so we are just going to say negative 0.4. And then if I do the same thing on the other side, negative 10 minus 8.25, enter, divided by 4, I'm getting negative 4.56. We're just going to leave it as negative 4.5. So what that means is my graph crosses at negative 0.4 and negative 4.5. So these are my x-intercepts. Alright, so let's go back to our other page. Well, for you guys, that's just moving your page, your pencil. All right, so our vertex, if I can remember right, let's go ahead and fill in our x-intercept. So negative 0.4 comma 0. Make sure you put your decimal point in there. And negative 4.5 comma 0. We said our y-intercept was 0, 4. 2, 10, 4 as a minimum. I think it was 2.5. If it's wrong, I can't remember right. Negative 2.5, right? Alpha to be, yes. So negative 2.5, negative 33.5. So if negative 2.5, we know that actually negative 4.5, you can put that one next if you want, negative 4.5 that way. This is an x-intercept. We know that negative 0.4 is also an x-intercept. There's no one right way to do your chart, guys. Okay. You just need to make sure you have your vertex and your x-intercepts on there. So we said that the first thing that we did was find the vertex. The second thing we did was find the x-intercepts. And the third thing to do is to fill in the rest of this chart. So we go back to our calculator for that. So we're going to go over to y equals, and we're going to type this equation in without the equal 0. So 2, make sure to clear out the other one that was in there. X squared plus 10x plus 4. And this time we want to click on table. Remember, we have to hit second and then table. If you hit on graph, it's no big deal. All right, just second table. And if you're looking between negative 2 and negative 3 in your table, that's where it starts to balance, and then it goes back the opposite direction. Do you guys see that? Between negative 2 and negative 3 in your x column. If you look in your y column, it's negative 8 and negative 8, and then it bounces between negative 4 and negative 4, 4, 4, and 16 and 16, and so forth, which means that's going to be the peak or the vertex. So after negative 4, let's do maybe negative 5 on our graph. And the x value is 4. Forgot to plug in 0 for both of these. And then maybe negative 6, which is going to make that 16. And then if we are at negative 0.4, okay, that's just between negative 1 and 0. So then let's put 0 on here. 4. This is actually my y-intercept, right? And then 1, 16. Do you guys see how your chart balances back and forth? Bounces back and forth. Look at your chart, or at least look at my chart up here real quick. I'm starting here at some crazy number, right? And then I bounce between 0 and 0, 4 and 4, 16 and 16. So I perfectly balanced my chart. And if you can do that on your graph, then I would encourage you to. All right, let's go ahead and draw our x and y axis. For the most part, I'm in the positives for my y-axis. So let's just go ahead and draw kind of down here. Obviously, we can't go up to 16 and down to negative 33, which I'm going to check that real fast. You guys start graphing, okay? All right, my big time apologies. I just was looking at it, and somehow my vertex is wrong. I'm sure you guys all knew that already, right? And you're thinking, come on, Miss Marianne. It should actually be negative 8.5. Should be your vertex, which makes things look a little bit easier. I don't know how that happened, but it did. And that just shows you that when you plug it into your calculator is not always right. So you got to make sure, right? Things looked a little bit funky, and so I was just checking to make sure. So if I graph this -2.5 and -8.5, again, let's always just try to keep our x-axis the same. So -2.5 is going to be about right here, and then down 8.5. Obviously, I can't go down 8.5, so I'm just going to put it here. And this is why we label, because our graph is not always going to be exactly accurate. And so if you are labeling it and you're telling me what the points are, then that's going to be a lot easier. Okay. Alright, so then I would label this vertex is -2.5, -8.5. I know I have a point at -4.5, 0, and I have a point at 0.40, which is barely there, -0.40. At 0.4, I'm crossing the y-intercept, y-axis. At 1, I'm at 16, which is going to be way off the grid. At -5, I'm at 4 as well, and then 16. So I know I'm going fast, but you know how to graph. Make sure that you're labeling -0.40 and -4.50, and then our axis of symmetry, x equals -2.5. Okay, and then the last thing that we're going to do is put our solutions down there, right? So we said that our solutions were just our x-intercepts, but we put them in the brackets as answers, -0.4, -4.5. All right? So you have a few problems to be doing and to work on. There's only 3 of them. There's some fill-in-the-blank vocab. You can use your notes. You can work with your neighbor, but that's what you should be working on. And if you get finished, then there is a review assignment. All right? And then when I get back, we will begin working on our very last lesson for this unit. So I need you to please work hard. Work with each other. If someone is stuck, guys, please help each other until I get back, and then we will resume when I get back, okay?